At Sierra, discover top workout gear at incredible prices, which might lead to another discovery. Your headphones haven't been connected this whole time. Awkward. Discover top brands at unexpectedly low prices. Sierra, let's get moving.
On WhatsApp, no one can see or hear your personal messages. Whether it's a voice call, message, or sending a password. To WhatsApp, it's all just this. So whether you're sharing the streaming password in the family chat or trading those late-night voice messages that could basically become a podcast, your personal messages stay between you, your friends, and your family. No one else. Not even us. WhatsApp. Message privately with everyone.
I'm not always a great sleeper. And on Monday night, I woke up and went to get myself a glass of water. Technically, it was early Tuesday morning, and I peeked at my phone to read the news. I know you shouldn't do that, sleep hygiene, etc., but I did. The Senate was in the middle of a vote-a-rama on President Trump's domestic policy bill. I wanted to see what was going on. And when I looked, I saw that the big piece of AI policy, an amendment to block states from making AI laws, was gone. They took it out of the bill. I was kind of stunned.
I was surprised.
That's Will Oremus from The Washington Post. It makes me feel better that he also didn't see this coming.
It could have gone any of a number of ways, but the way it did in fact go was one of the weirdest ones, I think.
This was a very contentious issue. It died in this piece of legislation, but something tells me this is not the last we are going to hear about national AI policy in Congress.
AI policy is going to be a big issue for years to come. And the idea of preempting states' ability to regulate AI is one that's going to continue to come up in these discussions because the tech industry and a lot of leaders in Congress have a really strong interest in having just one set of AI rules apply to everybody. But it's also going to continue to be controversial because, as we all know, Congress struggles to do the thing that Congress is tasked with doing, which is pass laws. And states have a much easier time at that. And states have passed a number of laws already around AI and probably will continue to do so for the time being that they're not going to want to give up. And critics of the tech industry and consumer protection watchdogs are not going to want to let states give up those rights either.
Today on the show, AI boosters lost in Washington this week. But this is just the start of a much larger fight. I'm Lizzie O'Leary, and you're listening to What Next TBD, a show about technology, power, and how the future will be determined. Stick around.
This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game, shifting a little money here, a little there, just hoping it all works out? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can be a better budgeter and potentially lower your insurance bill, too. You tell Progressive what you want to pay for car insurance, and they'll help you find options within your budget. Try it today at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
This is obviously a massive, controversial piece of legislation, and there are many conversations that people can have about it. But for our purposes, we're going to talk about the AI part. There was this proposed moratorium on state legislation of artificial intelligence. What was it, and what was it supposed to do?
2 years ago, the conversation around AI in Washington was about how dangerous this new technology could be. Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, testified to Congress that AI could pose existential risks to humanity and that we needed to get a handle on it and make sure it was developed safely, and he was here to help with that. That is not the conversation that we have been having in 2025. Since Trump took office, the AI policy conversation in Washington has been about how can we beat China? How can we make sure American AI firms are more innovative, give us more capabilities in the future than Chinese AI firms do? And how can we pave the road for them as smoothly as possible to go ahead and build whatever it is they want to build? And as part of that agenda, this idea came up. And so this year, as Congress began figuring out what they wanted to do in the area of AI policy, one of the first things they latched onto was, how about for now we stop states from passing regulations because that's going to create this confusing patchwork of laws. AI companies will have to spend half their time figuring out if they're complying with Florida's laws, but not Montana's. Let's just say, states, you stay out of this, let Congress figure it out. Let's do that first.
It seemed like for a while this was a fait accompli. The House already passed their version of this bill. Then it came to the Senate. It was, I think, a very challenging week for Republican lawmakers. But there was a really interesting kind of coalition of people who did not like this AI provision. I feel like every time I open my inbox over the past 2 weeks, I have gotten like a press release. I was getting texts about this. Like, people were really intense. So who wanted this moratorium on state laws around AI? It seems like big tech really wanted this, yeah?
Yeah, big tech and small tech and medium tech and every kind of tech. And there are some exceptions. There are some tech companies that do support certain types of AI policies. But by and large, the agenda of tech lobbyists was, hey, we have an opportunity here. We hear that Congress really wants us to be able to outcompete China. Let's seize this moment and get behind this idea to stop states from regulating AI. It'll make our lives so much easier. And so the tech lobby writ large really threw their weight behind this idea and made it a top priority once they saw that it was a possibility. At the same time, this idea really alarmed a lot of different groups of people, I think understandably, because states have spent the past several years trying to come up with thoughtful ways to regulate some of the worst abuses of AI, some of the most concerning aspects of how AI is developing and affecting people's lives. I am sure there have been some bad AI laws, but I also talk to a lot of state lawmakers who feel like they've been really thoughtful in the face of this inaction from Congress. They've been really thoughtful about, like, okay, what can we do to protect our citizens from a biased algorithm denying them a loan? Right? Or what can we do to protect our elections from political deepfakes that try to fool people into thinking the opponent said something they never said? And so they're passing these laws, and now they hear all of a sudden this moratorium would not only prohibit them from passing any new laws on AI for the next decade, but it would also force them to stop enforcing all the laws they've already passed. And so state lawmakers, state attorneys general were among the first to say, hey, wait a minute, like that's not right. Like, Congress, if you guys aren't going to do anything, at least let us do something.
One of the things that I found really interesting about this was that this did not actually hew to party lines. You had Democrats voting against the big bill, but you also had, for example, Republican state attorneys general who did not want their own power infringed.
Yeah, I think this is a fascinating moment in tech policy. And now lawmakers, especially in the states, but in Congress too, are really getting around to the idea that, okay, we can't just leave the internet unregulated. We tried that for, a few decades, and there have been various disasters. We need to try to get a handle on this. And so it's a really interesting time. And the dynamic that you just mentioned is one that we see again and again in tech policy, where you have, instead of having just the Republicans against the Democrats, you have, sometimes it's the sort of moderates of both parties on one side, and then the left and the right are against it. And that was kind of the case here. Sometimes it's like you get the family values people on one side and then the free speech people on the other side, or the national security people on one side and the privacy people on the other side. But all of these are really fascinating dichotomies that cut across the traditional Republican-Democratic divide.
There's one thing that I want to talk about, which is some of the personalities behind this. So Ted Cruz was the one who was sort of pushing the 10-year moratorium. But then you have Marsha Blackburn get involved. And to me, she is one of the most interesting people in Washington to watch in tech policy because she has done a lot. Her thing is child online safety, right? Like that is her thing. But she also represents Tennessee. Hello, Nashville music industry. And so she comes in with this sort of compromise. It would be a 5-year moratorium. But then in the end, she pulls her own plan. What happened there? Did Big Country Music call up Marsha Blackburn and say like, hey, we don't like this?
I love the idea of Big Country Music dictating the nation's tech policy. It's not so far from my understanding of what happened. I think there was a bit more to it than that. But you're right. Blackburn is this really interesting figure who has established herself as a leader in the Republican Party on trying to regulate harmful uses of the internet, in particular, sexual exploitation of kids, violations of kids' privacy, kids getting addicted to social media. And then also, I think somewhat separately, but maybe thematically similar, she has taken up the cause of representing the Nashville recording industry in their concerns about AI, which include the rise of these AI voice cloning tools so that like you or I could go to a computer and be like, hey, spit out a new song by, oh God, this is going to reveal the poverty of my
Morgan Wallen
knowledge. There you go. Spit out a new Morgan Wallen hit. And then, I'm going to circulate that. So Tennessee, in fact, has passed a state law to that effect. And Blackburn has proposed something similar at the federal level. But in the meantime, she doesn't want that. Her constituents don't want that Tennessee law repealed. They really like that. She sees it as a model for what she wants to do. And so I think she understands on a sort of personal level what the stakes are in preventing states from regulating AI, which is not to say I'm not like either endorsing or not endorsing her policies, but like I think this was a big issue for her. And so she put herself out front in the Senate as one of the few senators on the Republican side who stood up and said, I'm not going for this moratorium. I think it's a bad idea.
Democrats were pretty united against the moratorium. So all eyes were on Marsha Blackburn.
And then over the weekend, at the end on Sunday evening, Blackburn and Ted Cruz, who had been the main champion of the moratorium in the Senate, came out and said, we've reached a deal. It's only going to be 5 years instead of 10. And it's not going to apply to, and then, as I list these off, you can compare them with the list of Senator Blackburn's pet causes. It's not going to apply to laws about kids' online safety. It's not going to apply to laws that protect people's voice or likeness from impersonators. We're going to carve out those few categories and say states can still pass laws about that. And so all of a sudden it looked like, wow, they reached a deal. There's a compromise. They've probably got enough votes. It's probably going to pass. And that was where things stood when the Senate began this marathon vote-a-rama on Monday morning on the giant, big, beautiful bill, or if you're a Democrat, the big, ugly bill, whatever. It's a big bill. And it looked like it was going to include the moratorium.
Okay, but then they vote 99-1 against it. What?
So what happened in the meantime was that on Monday, throughout the day, Blackburn, after announcing this compromise, is apparently just getting inundated. I mean, you thought your inbox was bad, and I thought my inbox was bad. Imagine Marsha Blackburn's inbox on Monday when Tennessee wakes up and when the kids' safety advocates wake up and when, not to put too fine a point on it, when the dozens of bereaved parents of kids who died after suffering serious harm on social media, who had just rallied with Marsha Blackburn on Capitol Hill the week before to pass kids' online safety laws and to memorialize their lost children, they wake up and see that Blackburn has compromised with Cruz and they're going to pass this moratorium after all. And then, I don't know how detailed we want to get here, but like as I understand it, then this AI Law Institute, which nobody ever heard of or cared about except for lawyers before, came out with this, I thought, really interesting analysis that said the language was flawed and it actually didn't properly carve out the things it was supposed to carve out. And the Tennessee newspaper, had a story about how Blackburn had saved country music from AI, but then they apparently updated their story and they're like, actually, Blackburn might not have saved country music from AI. Anyway, by Monday evening, in the middle of this Votorama, Blackburn comes back out and says, you know what? The deal's off. Never mind. I'm against it. And in fact, I'm going to be the one to propose the amendment that strips this thing out of the bill entirely.
After the break, the state moratorium is gone. But guess what? There is actually a lot of money for AI in this bill, and big tech will benefit.
This episode is brought to you by Polestar. There's only one true way to experience the all-electric luxury SUV Polestar 3, and that's to take a test drive. It can go from 0 to 60 in as little as 4.8 seconds with the dynamic handling of a sports car. But to truly understand how it commands the road, you need to be behind the wheel. Up to 350 miles of range, the 3D surround sound system by Bowers & Wilkins. It's all something you have to experience to believe. So book your test drive for Polestar 3 today at polestar.com.
If you went on a road trip and you didn't stop for a Big Mac or drop a crispy fry between the car seats or use your McDonald's bag as a placemat, then that wasn't a road trip. It was just a really long drive. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
At participating McDonald's.
Hey, business owners, we know you know the importance of maximizing every dollar. With the Delta SkyMiles Reserve Business American Express card, you can make your expenses work just as hard as you. From afternoon coffee runs to stocking office supplies and even team dinners, you can earn miles on all your business expenses. Plus, you can earn 110,000 bonus miles for a limited time through July 16th. The Delta SkyMiles Reserve Business Card. If you travel, you know. Minimum spending requirements and terms apply. Offer ends 7/16/25.
So that has been the headline story, and it is a fascinating story. Before we move on to what this means for the future of AI policy, because I think it means a lot, I do want to point out that there is AI policy in this bill. It's just not this blanket moratorium. And I think most notably, there's a lot of money for AI in the military. What is in this thing?
Yeah, that's in keeping with the new paradigm in Congress on AI policy. It's like, it's not let's protect our citizens from this dangerous technology. It's like, let's make sure that if this technology is going to be dangerous, we're the ones inflicting the danger on our enemies. And so, yeah, there's hundreds of millions. Lizzie, how much money for AI and defense?
Oh, $450 million for autonomous robotic systems, $145 for looks like drones, $250 million within Cyber Command. There is a lot of money in here.
Yes, and some of the companies that will be getting that money are companies like Palantir, which uses AI to splice together all these different forms of data, including surveillance data, to come up with insights about intelligence, maybe insights about people, a lot of privacy concerns raised by that. Some of the kinds of concerns, in fact, that states are trying to address with their AI laws are raised by some of these defense applications of AI. And there's also, by the way, I should say there is funding. One of the steps here that we elided in this long and twisted saga of the moratorium was that there was this procedural rule in the Senate called the Byrd Rule that said you can't just throw in unrelated policies into a budget bill. And so in order to get the AI moratorium past that and past the Senate parliamentarian, Ted Cruz had rewritten it to say, actually, it's not a ban on states regulating AI. We're going to allocate, here's the budget nexus, we're going to allocate $500 million in new funds for AI deployment by states. And if they don't agree to the moratorium, they don't get any of that money. And if they do, they get the money. So they made it a budget. He made it a budget thing somehow, some way.
One of the big questions when we zoom out a bit is about national competitiveness. This idea that for national security reasons or for innovation policy, the U.S. needs to have a coherent national AI policy, largely to counter China. Of the many press releases I got, that theme was hit loudly in several of them. And do the people who worry about China's AI dominance have a point?
I honestly don't know. I don't think they're making it up entirely. I think there's no question that Chinese companies are working to develop some of these foundational AI models and wanting to compete with US companies to build the best, the most useful models. We already have policies in place that are partly meant to counter that. There are export controls that the Biden administration put into place on the super specialized, ridiculously expensive chips that you need to build and train these AI models. We're trying to keep those out of China's hands. So I think that there is something to it. I am not enough of an expert on either the direction of AI technology or geopolitics to evaluate exactly how valid that argument is. I will say that it turned out to be a very convenient argument for the US tech giants, where people were concerned about the flaws in their products or the harms that their products could cause or the jobs they could displace or the misinformation they might make up. And now all of a sudden they say, oh, yeah, but if you try to regulate us, then just imagine how much worse things will be when Chinese AI runs the world. And they've really latched onto that, and so have a fair amount of Republicans in Congress.
When I look at this enormous bill, right, the conversation around kind of the state law moratorium is, I guess you could say, a narrow AI policy framing to some degree. But you can look at larger policy questions and where they will be touched by AI, because I believe they will. Whether that is the amount of energy that is needed to power tremendous compute. And this bill took away clean energy tax breaks, clean energy credits. It also weakened the social safety net. And there is significant bipartisan concern about potential job losses to AI and automation. And it feels like sometimes the conversation around AI policy is divorced from some of the real world knock-on effects. I wonder, when you talk to people, if they are synthesizing those things together or if they're still looking at them in silos.
Yeah, I think it depends on who you talk to, but certainly the overall tenor of the conversation in Washington has changed under Trump. There's been this sort of vibe shift. I mean, the conversation under Biden was really about how can we start to get a handle on some of the myriad ways that AI is going to disrupt our society while leaving room for innovation. And now I think you could sort of say that those priorities have just flipped, right? Like now the conversation is, how can we make sure to pave the way for American AI innovation? And maybe let's also, then let's think a little bit about how we can address some of the harms. I don't think that they've been forgotten entirely, but they weren't a part of this bill at all. And I think that was part of the problem for some of the people who ultimately couldn't support the moratorium, including some of the Republican holdouts, which was that, look, okay, I get wanting to have one set of rules for the AI industry to play by across the country. But the reality is we don't have any rules for them to play by right now. And, maybe we'll get around to those, but until Congress can actually pass something that shows it can address some of the problems with AI, it doesn't make any sense to stop the states from doing it. And so I think where we'll see this idea resurface is the next time there is an idea to regulate AI in Congress in some way, there will be calls to preempt whatever states might be doing, at least in that area. But I absolutely think there will be efforts to regulate AI at the federal level, including, regulating its effects on jobs, its effects on misinformation. We in fact, we already did see this year, one of the few bipartisan laws that's substantive that Congress has passed was the Take It Down Act, which was a law about revenge porn and about AI deepfake nudes. It imposed a federal ban, and it forces tech platforms to take those down quickly when they're flagged. That's a rarity these days, but we could see more of that. Otherwise, I think they're still going to be stuck for the foreseeable future to actually get a handle on these big questions that AI raises for society.
Big tech wanted this moratorium, and I don't know if this means that Sam Altman and David Sachs in the White House or Mark Zuckerberg are less powerful, have less juice with Congress than I thought, or if it just means they're going to regroup. And, there are still no nationwide AI regulations, so they're going to keep their powder dry until the next fight.
Yeah, that's one of the big meta narratives that you and I and the people who look at tech and society have been following this year is when those tech titans spent that money on Trump's inauguration and lined up behind him, what were they buying and have they gotten their money's worth? And I think we still don't know for sure, but I think one thing we can say, and I think that the conversation around the AI moratorium reinforces this, the way I think about it is what they really bought, they didn't buy Trump. Because there are a lot of other people in Trump's ear. There are factions within the Republican Party that are vying for Trump's ear on various issues, and there's this constant internal tension between the different factions in his party. What those tech titans bought is a seat at the table, right? They bought a voice in the conversation. And so I think we're going to continue to see them getting maybe some of what they want or them almost getting what they want, which is what happened here. And then in other cases, them not getting what they want at all because just because you've pleased Trump on one day doesn't mean he's still going to be pleased with you a month later. Doesn't mean somebody else isn't going to come along with something he likes even more, and then he's going to turn and do things that aren't in your favor.
Will Oremus, it is always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you.
Likewise. Thanks so much for having me, Lizzie.
Will Oremus covers tech policy for The Washington Post. And that is it for our show today. What Next TBD is produced by Patrick Fort, Shayna Roth, and Evan Campbell. Our show is edited by Elena Schwartz. TBD is part of the larger What Next family. Mia Lobel is our executive producer, and Hillary Fry is our editor-in-chief. And if you're looking for even more Slate podcasts to listen to, I recommend Wednesday's episode of What Next. It's all about the Trump administration's effort to defund public media. Plus, you get to hear the wise words of Mr. Rogers. All right, we will be back next week with more episodes. I'm Lizzie O'Leary. Thanks for listening.
Call from mom. Answer it. Call silenced.
Instacart knows nothing gets between you and the game. That's why they make ordering from your couch easy. Stock up today and get all your groceries for the week delivered in as fast as 30 minutes without missing a minute of the game.
You have 47 new voicemails.
Download the app to get free delivery on your first 3 orders while supplies last. Minimum $10 per order. Additional terms apply.